Hello, and welcome to Wednesdays with Willa. I am your host, Willa White, and this is my weekly podcast show that airs on Wednesday mornings at 10 a.m. Eastern on my Facebook page, Willa White Medium. And it also goes out on my YouTube channel, Willa White, which is the best place to view the archive videos of past shows, because this is year 9 of episodes of Wednesdays with Willa. So I have a treasure trove of wonderful discussions that I've had with great guests over the years relating to spiritualism, mediumship, healing, faith, family, and more. You can also view this on the Lilydale Assembly Facebook page and YouTube channel. And so lots of different places for you to tune in and enjoy. If you missed the live show, please watch on the replay. And of course, like, share, subscribe, all those great things so that I can keep giving this out to other people and having this educate others. I feel like this is something people are going to find years from now and really enjoy the insights from my special guests. And today I am thrilled to welcome back onto the show Dr. Brenda Hawkins. Thanks for being here today, Brenda.
Thanks, Willa, and thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Dr. Brenda Hawkins, for those of you who don't know who she is a retired psychologist and also registered Lilydale medium who is on sabbatical for this year. So this summer, she's not available for private readings, but you might see her out and about doing message work and things like that. But she's taking a bit of a sabbatical at this point. But it's so great that she's here with us again today. We've done great past shows. We've done things about managing emotional overwhelm, mediumship, and the stages of grief. I refer you back to that show if you are in a particular stage of grief or someone that you know is going through this, when it's appropriate for them to work through with a medium and also themselves in terms of receiving spirit contact. So that's a fantastic show, along with Grief and Hoarding. That was a wonderful show. And Spiritual Emergence was our last year one, where we talked about what it was like to start to have intuitive and mediumship experiences and what to do next in terms of mental and emotional health. So Brenda has brought us some wonderful scientific psychology, but also merged that so beautifully with the spiritual understanding. And she's back here today to talk about grief and resilience. So this is going to be another great show.
Thanks, Willa. I've really been looking forward to it. Yes.
Excellent.
And about grief, for those who may not have seen the earlier videos or who may not have thought of grief or may not be a student of grief, grief is a very natural thing. It's a universal experience that we all have in our lives. And a lot of people will think about grief just in terms of somebody passing. Okay. The thing is, with grief, we have it in all different parts of our lives. Okay. Maybe to a different extent, a different degree. It may be different circumstance, different feelings around it. It may affect us differently, but it does impact on us in all sorts of areas of life. For example, if we go from one job to another, it may be a job, the new one may be one that we're really looking forward to. It may be a step up. It may be exactly what we're looking for. And at the same time, we'll be grieving about the old one because even if it wasn't perfect, which in human life, nothing is ever really perfect anyway, okay? But we'll have grief also because we'll be grieving that old job, our old routine, the surroundings, the relationships we had at the old job, the ones that felt good to us, and also grieving the loss of what other relationships could have been but weren't. Okay. Um, Even loss of identity. Um, as we grow and develop, because we're always growing and developing, we can be very different people now from the way we were, say, back when we were 2 or 3 years old. Okay.
We would
We
hope so.
developed it. Pardon?
We would hope so.
We would hope so. Yeah. Yeah, we would hope so. Yeah, we develop more of our strengths. We're working on our weaknesses, our challenges. Okay. We may have developed new interests. We may have let go of old interests. So we may uh, grieve the loss of identity. Who am I now? Or I feel like I'm growing beyond where I have been. Where is my future taking me? Where am I going? Who am I really?
Wow.
The loss of feelings of safety and security. A lot of people are feeling that right now. A home neighborhood may have been a welcoming, safe place for the past, what, 20 years that you may have lived in a house, and suddenly you don't have that feeling anymore.
Mm,
And so there's grief with that.
sure.
So grief can be in all parts of our lives, even friendships where we may have a really good friendship with someone, but then throughout our growth, okay, we wind up going on different paths. And so we grieve the loss of how things used to be. So, yes, grief is a very normal, natural, universal aspect of our experience. And so it's really good to know to instead of pushing away the grief, we humans tend to want to push it away because it doesn't feel good. But that's how we can get stuck.
Mm,
Okay. The thing is to acknowledge the grief, know that it's normal, natural. How do we work with the grief? Okay. Having that balance of doing the actual grief work versus having some time for laughter, for fun. Having laughter and fun does not negate the grief. Okay. These two things work together, everything in balance. Okay.
and we can hold two emotions at the same
Mm-hmm.
time that seem paradoxical.
Mm-hmm. Right, right. I know one woman that I worked with in therapy. She was grieving the loss of her mother, and she relayed to me how at her coffee break at work, one of her coworkers told this outrageous joke that had her laughing so hard she almost spit her coffee out. And she says, but then later I felt so guilty and so bad because how can I laugh when my mother is lying there in the grave? But the thing is, one does not negate the other. That's part of our healing.
True.
That's why we're programmed that way to still be able to laugh when we have grief going on. Also, they can both coexist, and they're both needed and necessary.
Absolutely. And the more we understand that, as mediums, people have this assumption that we're around death so much that how can you possibly smile? How can you possibly be joyful? But
Mm-hmm.
if you're a spiritual medium and you embrace the understandings of spiritualism and things that help us to learn and grow and know that life continues on, it really does help us to
Mm-hmm.
know what we know. And on a deeper level, we can coexist with the grief, but move through it in a different way, in a different fashion, and hopefully
Mm-hmm.
be more resilient. Even as mediums, we do grieve, and we help people through their grief as best we can. But it there's an underlying joy, wouldn't you say, Brenda?
Yeah.
There's an
Mm-hmm.
underlying joy that sort of lifts and buoys things up if we allow it. It's that law of life.
Right, right. And the cycle of life.
Yes.
Okay. Like they sing about on the Lion King movie, the cycle of life.
Yes, so
Yes. And now I'm going to have that earworm all day.
good.
We can think of worse things, though, to be an earworm. Anyway, um, yeah, having that enjoyment, the joy, as well as the grief. Okay. In fact, uh, in Judaism, there's a prayer called the Mourner's Kaddish. And it's a prayer that you say when someone has passed. And basically, it's uh, it's a prayer about faith and about hope. And it's a reminder for us really that we were lucky to have that person in our life. Wasn't that a gift? And again, relationships are never perfect. Okay, we always have that caveat because we learn from each other that way too, push and the pull sometimes. But we're still uh, blessed to have that person in our lives and we celebrate them. Okay. So, yeah, that's a very natural part of grieving, a very balanced, healthy part of grieving. And getting that social support too, because the Kaddish is typically said with a certain number of people. So you have that social support too.
Beautiful. And it's a
Mm-hmm.
way of celebrating that person who's passed
Right.
during the process of the prayer. And
Mm-hmm.
it's a way of amalgamating into the new, but honoring the old at the same time.
Right.
Yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
think it's such a beautiful thing to know that prayer force is life force.
Mm-hmm. It
And so
is.
they by doing this, now they do this on a daily level for about a year, is that right? With
Yeah,
the
there's
prayer?
yeah, during well, in Shabbat services, they do it, every Shabbat,
Hmm.
okay, of the services that I've witnessed. Um, and then, of course, the first year is a very important time to be doing the Kaddish,
Hmm.
okay.
Hmm.
Um, and then, of course, you always uh, acknowledge the 1 year anniversary and the yard site, okay, the anniversaries of a person crossing over. And again, yes, we wish we could still have that person physically in our lives, and we're so lucky and so glad that we had that person. And as long as we remember that person, they're still a part of us.
So
There's
would you
even a
say
song that says that.
that prayer is like a song that
Mm-hmm.
uplifts us so that we have a focal point of moving forward in the grief so that we're not just dissolving into tears, but that
Right.
we have something to do with that energy because sometimes grief
Mm-hmm.
can be so clenching. It's almost like it's
Yeah.
hard to take a deep breath, your throat feels funny, and you
Mm-hmm.
just kind of feeling in that hardened space sometimes, right? With
Mm-hmm.
grief. But when we hum, when we sing, when we chant, when we pray, that can soothe the parasympathetic
For
system
sure. Mm-hmm.
and on a science level. But it can also help us emotionally to translate through that grief and build
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's important to work with grief physically that way, and also a combination of the spiritual and the physical and the spiritual. Okay, putting those two together. Yes, the chanting, the praying, especially if you have other people around you who are joining with you.
the fellowship
Okay,
of that
the
assists. Yeah.
fellowship of that. Yes, and also too it helps to work against that tendency that we have to tighten up because again we're wanting to push the mourning away, we're wanting to push the grief away. Okay, in fact in our culture uh, we're perceived of being strong when we don't show grief. You hear people say it on an everyday level in stories on in the movies and on TV. We see it, how is so and so doing? Oh, he's being strong. He's being strong for his kids.
Right.
Which that way the kids get the message of it's not okay to cry. It's okay if mom cries, it's okay if dad cries, and they continue. The world doesn't come to an end if they cry. They're still okay.
True.
And it teaches them that it's okay to be in touch with the grief, to cry, to express it appropriately, because that's part of how we move on. And that upliftment that we get from the prayers, the chanting, and all of that, that gives us the energy to continue moving through the grief
Hmm.
until we can get through that resolution. And that paves the way for developing resilience.
And I think that's beautifully stated. And I love the fact that we're moving into that territory and recognizing that, like as you said, sometimes people judge another person about what kind of character they have, right? The virtues
Mhm.
of them as they go through grief. Well, so and so so strong because we don't want a bunch of people puddled on the floor crying. I get that,
Mhm.
but
Yeah.
I've lost track of the number of times a client who is like looks beautiful and strong and smiling across from me, and their person in spirit says, "You've been telling everybody you're fine, but you're not fine." And
Hmm.
it's almost like that's the trigger. They're like, I'm not, I'm not fine. And
Hmm.
they've gotten so used to saying, I'm fine, I could do this, I could do this. And then they wonder where everybody else is gone. They don't feel like
Hmm.
they can rely on asking for help because at a certain point, people stop. They stop asking, are you okay? Do you need help? Do you want me to do this for
Hmm.
you? And it's about that time that we as humans, as my clients especially, that they're like, I really could have used some help from somebody. And so they kind of go into a slight resentment mode of having been
Hmm.
so strong, even though they've made this.
Yeah, they were pushing away the offers for
Right.
help, and then they
Yes.
get bent out of shape when the offers stop coming.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just a human foible that a lot of us have.
We all do this at some point or other, and we're just like, now how are we supposed to ask for help? It makes us look wimpy.
Hmm.
It makes us look,
And see, you can be fine and still be feeling pain.
yes, that's right.
Feeling pain doesn't mean that you're not fine.
Right.
In fact, as I've told my clients in the past, if you weren't feeling pain, I would be worried about you right now.
Mhm. Good point.
Mhm.
Point.
Yeah. Because I worked a lot with trauma and abuse survivors, and there was a lot of grief with them. And yeah, well, not just one woman, a number of them would be mentally beating up on themselves, okay, because they felt like they had to be strong all the time and laughing and just very jovial, upbeat. And, you can't feel that way all the time when you're grieving. And so, when you say to somebody like that, well, when they finally admit, hey, I feel just really bad, my energy's gone, so on and so forth. And they're the person just lost both parents in a car accident. Okay. It's okay to say, well, what you're feeling is natural, it's normal. I would be worried about you if you weren't feeling that. Because that's how we get through the grief. We feel the feelings, we get the energy from support from other people, and we move on. Kind of like we have to psychologically, emotionally digest what has happened.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. It's like nothing, yes, things will never be the way they were. Okay, this is a change, and your life goes on. And we can even learn. In fact, the lessons that we learn in life are the harder they are, the more important they are. So I had a teacher one time who told me that when you experience something like that, just say to spirit, thank you for this opportunity, even if you have to say it through gritted teeth. Okay. Because
Or with
we
a little
grow
bit of
and
sarcasm. Thank you so much
right.
for
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. Thank you for this opportunity.
But eventually you'll be able to say it in a different way. But I remember we were chatting before this when we were brainstorming for the show, and you said something that I wrote down, and it said it was the I'm fine people.
Hmm.
Help helps to build resilience. Can you
Hmm.
help us lean into that right now? What does that really mean? Getting help helps to build resilience.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, getting help, no matter what kind of help it is, okay, it's like it gives you that moral support. Okay, I'm not alone in this. Someone is here. They understand what I'm going through. and they're quote unquote on my side in this pain. Okay. They recognize I'm in pain and it's okay with them. And that brings the relationship closer too, which again gives you more energy to move forward. Okay. So it's always good to ask for help. You want to make it very specific and objective and behavioral, though, so people know what it is that you're needing that would really help you. Okay.
And then
Um,
what do you do if you're like, well, I asked for help and it didn't come?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. Then it's like the universe is giving you an opportunity to develop some more muscles.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, we
And
were
figure
talking
out
about
how to
muscle.
do it for yourself. Yeah, just like, okay, an athlete, well, someone who wants to become an athlete or even just wants to tone up. Okay. Someone who's just starting out starts out with the little 1 pound hand weights or the 5 pounders. They don't go with the really big, heavy ones right away. Okay.
Heavyweight champion of the world.
Exactly, exactly. You can hurt yourself that way. So you start with the 1 pound ones, which may seem light to other people, but for you, at your stage of development, it feels heavy, and you keep working with that until you can feel like you can handle that. And then the universe gives you a 5 pound weight. And then as you manage that, the universe gives you a 10 pound weight. In fact, it reminds me of a bumper sticker I saw one time out on the highway, and it said, "They say God doesn't give us anything we can't handle. Gee, I wish he didn't have so much confidence in me."
Oh, that's great. That's great.
Yeah,
Thanks for
and I've
being
seen it on
confident in
yeah,
me.
I've seen it on some t-shirts too.
Oh, that's
But
cute.
yeah, but it's like we have to remind ourselves, okay, spirit doesn't give us anything we can't handle. We may not know how to handle it right away, step one, step two, step three. We may have to feel our way through it, get resources if we can, even just someone that you can talk to, that you
Mhm.
feel safe with. Um, and who is accepting, non-judgmental, someone to talk to. Um, if you have a big energetic dog, you physically don't have the strength to take the dog walkies. Okay. Get either a friend, a strong, tall friend, or get a professional dog walker to take the dog out for a few walks. Or the same is true of chores around the house.
Mhm. Mhm.
Give yourself that little bit of a break
Yeah,
because it
sometimes
does take a
we
lot
need
of
to
energy.
insulate a little bit.
Hmm.
A
We need to
cocoon.
insulate. Yeah, we need to take in some energy. We need to rest a little. That's why it's called grief work.
Hmm.
Yeah, it takes energy. And so, yeah, we need that physical energy, the emotional energy, the spiritual energy.
Hmm.
Yeah, and staying connected with spirit. And sometimes it's hard to feel that when you're grieving and you feel like your insides are being pulled out.
Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
But sometimes you just have to keep saying the prayers, even just an informal conversation with spirit, like, hey, God, what's up with this? I'm
Yeah.
tired.
And,
Yeah.
keeping that conversation, that conscious linking with the divine really does
Mhm.
help. And
Right.
I reinforce that understanding, movement, like you were talking about earlier, that movement actually helps us reinforce life. Every
Hmm.
time we do shift purposefully, all these amazing hormones, all of these amazing things happen within our muscles
Right.
that actually then help us on an energetic, spiritual level and physical
Mhm.
level to proceed productively in our lives. So, yes, there's a time to cocoon, but then there's a time to say, okay, now I'm going to get up, I'm going to purposefully move, because as long as I'm stagnating, there's that, I think for most people, they have to understand the difference between when they're stagnating and when
Mhm.
they're cocooning, because that's a um, that's a distinction that some people get blurry about. Do you think you could
Mm-hmm.
explain a bit more to people? Maybe you have better terms than that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Uh, when you're working with grief, okay, there's a time and a place for everything. Okay. Like they say in that song by the Birds, turn, 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 a time and a place for everything. Okay. And for everything, there's a purpose. Okay.
Hmm.
So, yes, there's a time when we need to just curl up with our blankies and some tea and watch some old black and white 1940s movies on TV.
Yes.
Okay. Or something super silly or Carol Burnett, something like that. Something that's fun and uplifting, something light. Okay. And then there's a time for going out, being around people. For example, if you have a friend, let's say you've been sitting curled up watching the tube, and a friend calls you and says, "Hey, you want to come over to my house and have a cup of coffee?" Of course, she's not asking if you need to drink coffee because you've got coffee at home. What she's saying is, "Hey, I know you're going through a hard time. I'd like to be with you." And so a good balance would be to say, okay, yes, I'll come over. Maybe not for a long time, just a little short visit, because you can place those boundaries there. Because you may not have energy for a full hour visit, maybe just 20 minutes.
That's right.
Okay.
I think that's an
Yeah.
excellent point because when people are going through grief, sometimes they alternate between being very shut down and then also being very hypersensitive. So when
Mm-hmm.
they're around other people, sometimes they're just like rubbed raw very quickly, very easily.
Mm-hmm.
And it's even in situations they wouldn't normally have felt were overwhelming. So I think
Mm-hmm.
having some of those time parameters are really helpful when you're dealing with the hypersensitivity or you're trying to deal with reentry into a world that doesn't have your person in it anymore,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have
Right.
that identity that you had anymore. Because
Mm-hmm.
so be gentle with yourself and maybe set some things up, but don't recoil too much into social anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
we, we,
Right.
we want to at least put a toe in the water and maybe out to your
Mm-hmm.
feet and just as best you
Yeah.
can ease into some of these things to so that you don't just become one big nerve.
Hmm. Yeah, because you see, when we have a loss and we're feeling that grief, it's kind of like to use an analogy, we have a bruise, and like say if we have a bruise on our arm, okay, if we touch it just at least a little bit, it may hurt. If that bruise wasn't there, it wouldn't matter. Okay, we wouldn't feel any pain, but the bruise, okay, the grief is a bruise, okay. And so, yeah, we will be sensitive to things. So that's why it's so important too. Like, say, for example, the cup of coffee. It's important to be around people who are accepting, okay, unconditionally accepting, non-judgmental, who can accept your boundaries around the time. And you can just be where you're at with them. If you want to laugh, that's okay. If you want to cry or talk about old memories, that's okay too.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Hmm.
It'd be
Someone
very
who,
healing to have that for a little while to to not feel that you're so burdened by it alone.
mhm,
Because I
exactly.
see this so often with in families. Some families they are in grief and they scatter to the four winds and they go and cry in their own little corners. And then some
Hmm.
families are very much like, I love you. Let's get this through together. And they're just like in a kumbaya space, if you
Uh-huh.
will, about this. So not everybody has the equalizer in this. And so it's good to know where we need to develop the friendships, the other supports that are
Hmm.
there for us, be it through modes of counseling or through friendships where we have that emotional support through those journeys, or through a relationship with the divine, the God
Mm-hmm.
source of all, and really feeling the the peace that can come over you when you let that in daily.
Exactly. Exactly. And one thing that occurs to me as we're talking about it is even if grief isn't going on, it's important to develop kind of like, I'll call it a resilience bank.
Ooh, let's
Okay.
talk about resilience bank.
Yeah. Okay. That's where you have good times with people and nothing really is going on, or there's something, excuse me, to celebrate. For example, I know a woman who lost her entire family in the Holocaust. Okay, her family was at Auschwitz and Bergen-Belsen, and only her parents survived. They escaped, and so what she does is every occasion. Every time you can celebrate something, she celebrates it. She gets people together. Somebody uh, could have bought a new house or finally did the artwork that they were wanting to do or read the book they were wanting to read. Everything you celebrate, it gather people together and you celebrate. So you build up inside of yourself a whole bunch of experiences of good times, having people together, supportive people, and laughing and talking together.
See, that
So
to
that's what
me
I call,
is a definition of thriving, not just surviving.
yeah, that's
There's a
thriving.
victorious feeling because of the celebration.
Yeah, you grow through the loss. You know, you get through it and you grow through it, and then and you develop resilience by doing that. Okay, you develop your friendships, relationships, and then you go on to have good times together. Even if it's a little tiny thing like so and so finally got their car fixed. Yay, let's celebrate. It doesn't have to be a big deal. What's important is getting the people together and celebrating.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
having that social support is important, and being willing to celebrate is the other part
Yeah,
of that. You almost have
exactly.
to tell yourself, I feel willing to let this abundance of love flow
Mm-hmm.
through me and
Right.
fill up the empty holes that I feel right now. That I'm
Mm-hmm.
letting that light of others and the light of the divine flow into those spaces. All
Exactly.
the nooks and
Exactly.
crannies.
Exactly. And speaking of the divine, um, it's also too, it can be helpful to have conversations with the divine the way you would with a really good friend. It doesn't have to be all flowery things that you write on a piece of paper and then read. Okay. Uh, you can just talk to them the way you would your very best friend who's completely accepting and non-judgmental because God can handle anything. It's okay to get angry at God because that happens too when we're experiencing loss because it can feel so unfair. It's so painful. And it's like, gee, I worked so hard. I'm conscientious. I'm good to people. Why did this happen? Okay. So, yeah, we can say to God, hey, what's up with this? I am so not happy right now. Or put it in stronger terms, whatever terms you want to use, because
Some people
God can
become very
handle it.
angry with God about
And
things.
that's okay.
Yeah.
God is bigger than our anger. As big as our anger can feel, God is even bigger than that. God created anger. Okay. Anger has a use, it has a purpose. What's important is to feel the feelings, let go of it, and then let that be like a red light on your dashboard. Hey, I'm angry. Something needs to be paid attention to and worked with. You don't just take the anger out on someone, displace it. Okay.
Hmm.
And see,
Yeah, let's
when
talk
we're,
about pain displacement. That would be a good time to talk about pain displacement.
mm-hmm,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, when we're grieving, okay, and of course we're taught to just keep everything inside and say, I'm fine, so on and so forth. Still, the pain kind of seeps out. And
Mhm.
so we can displace it onto other people or other animals. Our tone of voice may be sharper,
Mhm.
or uh, try as we might, we may forget something that we promised to do for someone. Okay. And they may say, hey, how come you didn't pick me up at thus and such a place? And you may feel like, well, gee, look, I've got all this going on. How dare you confront me about this? Don't you see what I'm going through? Okay. So it can come out in all sorts of ways. Even just the tone of voice. You may not mean for it to be sharp or bitter or angry. It could the words may be just something very matter of fact, very ordinary, but the tone comes out. Okay. And so the other person responds to that tone. And before you know it, you got a whole big hoo-ha going on.
That's right.
And
A
it's
whole
not
lot of
even
triggering.
about,
A whole lot
yeah,
of triggering.
and it's not even about the thing you're arguing about. It's about the pain of grief, losing somebody, or losing the job, or not feeling safe anymore. Mm-hmm. Or your cat getting sick, whatever. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So it's much easier, really, in the long run to say, hey, I feel really bummed out right now. I've got so much going on. No, I can't pick you up this afternoon. Some people use the expression, I don't have the bandwidth for it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's okay to set limits and boundaries instead of letting the pain, the anger that comes from pain, seep out and get laid on someone who just happened to be there. Hmm.
Yeah. There
Yeah.
is a responsibility we have for our words and our deeds. And it's hard when we're going through emotional times. The executive functioning might not be there
Hmm.
because
Right.
they're just sort of in a raw nerve place. There's stuff that they've been tamping down, and now it's thundering out like lava from the volcano. And with great power comes great responsibility. And we
Hmm.
don't want the destruction to happen in other areas of a life. And
Yeah.
so, in this discussion of grief and resilience, resilience means having self-awareness
Hmm.
and
Right.
really doing assessment of where you are about things. And there's a place for gentleness for yourself and
Hmm.
others, but there's also,
Right.
wouldn't you say there's almost like a firmness? You kind of almost have to take yourself in hand and say, this, I'm going to focus on my next step. Just going to focus
Hmm.
on that right now. And
Yeah.
then I can try to get to the next step. And then I can get
Hmm.
to the next step. So, how do you decide in this understanding of resilience? How do you decide what the next step is?
Hmm. You'll feel it. Okay. And sometimes you have to have conversations with yourself. Okay, how am I feeling physically, mentally, emotionally? How is my sleep? How is my appetite? Kind of like taking stock, taking inventory of where you're at and what feels right to you right now, which that can change from one moment to the next. And you have to give yourself the space to do that too. And also know uh, when to one of my clinical supervisors used to call it know when to take yourself out of the game.
There we go.
Yeah, know when you don't have the inner resources to deal with whatever.
Yeah, hit
Take
the
yourself
bench.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah, hit the bench. Uh-huh. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, and that's important to have. And you can use that time when you're on the bench, okay, to do more growing, more self-awareness, um, more development, more resilience development.
hmm hmm
Because see, we also learn too in all at all sorts of levels by going through these hard times. For example, if someone had never felt hurt or pain in their life, how could they possibly understand someone who's going through it? That's why we talk about the wounded healer. Wounded healers uh, have a very wonderful supply of resilience because they've had to work on that. They've worked through, they've gone through all the different kinds of grief, okay, that their lives have brought to them. They've learned, they've developed, and they've learned the coping, they've learned what helps them, what doesn't help them. And so they can talk to the person who's going through it. They understand where the person is coming from. It's like you don't get enmeshed in the other person's grief, but you can feel how it is for them. Okay. Yeah. And talk with them about that. And in that way, you're these guides back out in the Old West where they would lead a party of families through a certain forest area. You know the path. And so you give them that space to go along the path because you know the path. You know where the bears are, you know where the birds are to enjoy. Um, you know where the sticky bushes are. Okay.
Yeah,
So
you know
yeah,
where the obstacles are on the course.
exactly, exactly. And so since you have that knowledge, then they can go along their path. You're not picking them up and carrying them along the path. You're helping them to get through the path.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
hmm
That's
Yeah,
very, it reminds me of Pilgrim's Progress, which is that wonderful book, and
right.
the different sequences of things that uh, the character goes through in recognizing the spiritual path and how to stay on it and how to, the things that take us off in the distraction mode. But when we go back to the spiritual centering, that will guide us through that with light and love. And
hmm
I feel what you're saying deeply because it's not that you can necessarily avoid all pain, but you can choose, by your actions and your reactions, how you're going to evolve in life. And so
hmm
we're very much engaging with life. There's an active participation in life when you're wanting to use that resilience as you're traversing the the territory of grief. We're not just
hmm
passive victims in the world.
Yeah.
Well, we can be resilient grievers that are taking steps daily to manage that, setting small, daily, realistic goals, right? So
hmm
that we can cultivate physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual health, and
hmm
taking a walk, getting your yayas out, going back to nature, having those moments of connection and in the deeper energetic field really do help us. But
hmm
I think it does come down to choice. It's that law of
Yeah.
choice, spiritual natural law of choice. We're choosing to move forward. We're choosing
hmm
to connect with others. We're choosing to communicate our feelings and to foster that resilience. It's a choice at
hmm
basic level, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, it is. In fact, there's a whole field of psychology that deals with how we make choices, the impact on it on us by doing that, and a book that comes to my mind um, is a book called Man's Search for Meaning. Now, that sounds like it would be a really big, heavy book.
It does
Okay.
sound like that.
Yeah, but it's a very excellent book. It was written by a psychiatrist who wound up in the concentration camps. Talk about major loss in all sorts of levels. And they had even burned all of his work and made him watch. Yeah. And so anyway, he was there in the concentration camp, and he was, of course, being a psychiatrist, he was observing human behavior. And what he noticed was that some some of the men that he was encamped with uh, would continue to get up every morning and do incredible hard work, horrible deprivation, and they still continued. Okay. Whereas he would see other men who would literally lie down and die.
Yeah.
And so he started talking to the different people, finding out how they were dealing with everything. And what he saw was that there was a pattern that the men who had chosen their attitude, they figured, well, they had no control over their physical environment or what happened to them, but they could control what happened inside their heads. They
Mm-hmm.
weren't going to give the Nazis free rent in their head. Okay. So, and they knew that on the planet, there's a beginning, a middle, and an end to everything. We may not know when those are, okay, but there is a beginning, middle, and end. So they just focused on that, thought about their families, even though they didn't know where they were. They would just hope and pray for the best for them. Okay. And they would just take one day at a time, which interestingly enough is part of the 12-step program, taking one day at a time.
Right.
And so those were the men who continued to live, whereas the other men who, and he said they literally lay down and died, they had given up hope. They were
Mm.
seeing this as stretching into infinity, the hardship. It
Wow.
was just too much. It was too overwhelming. Even taking a breath was too hard. And so, yeah, we can do a lot inside of our heads.
Wow. What an
Mm-hmm.
example, Brenda. That just brings it really home. Wow. And that
Mm-hmm.
reinforces that resilience is not necessarily a trait. It's a
Mm-hmm.
skill, it's a choice
Yeah,
we make. It's something we can cultivate and
we can
develop
learn it.
over time and even in the face of immense loss and trauma
Mm-hmm.
by just focusing on those little small daily things and you know, it, trying to be mindful in
Yeah.
our
Mm-hmm.
movements and no matter what happens, even if you get to a place of great spiritual understanding, you're going to have to chop wood and carry water. So, of course, you're going to have to chop wood and carry water when you're feeling in that lower mind and
Mm-hmm.
surrounded
Yeah.
by people of lower mind. We have to be aware of choosing the higher mind.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What an amazing example, Brenda. Whew.
Yeah. And it's actually a short book. It's written very conversationally. Viktor Frankl is the name of the author, and I highly recommend people read it.
Mm,
It was part of a reading list. I had an upper level theories of psychotherapy class that I was teaching at the college. And so the students could pick whatever book they felt drawn to. And this one woman picked up Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. And when she got up to the class to give her report on it, she started out by just holding the book up in front of her like that. And she says, "You guys got to read this. You guys got to read this." And her voice started to break. She says, "It'll change your life. You guys got to read this." And of course, that got everybody's attention. Like, what? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that's how much of an impact.
she had a deep emotional response and recognition
Mm-hmm.
of truth that she had read in that book. And
Exactly.
she saw that as a gift.
She saw it as a gift, and it also gave her uh, cognitive tools, mental tools to work with, also. And I
Mm,
didn't know what her own personal history was as a professor. That would have been inappropriate for me because they weren't my clients or patients; these were my
right.
students. Okay, but it sounds like it had a really uh, impactful contribution to make to her. And
Hmm.
so, yeah, I recommend it to people highly.
Yeah, that sounds a
Yeah.
great book. I know I found a really neat one by Earl Grolman, Grolleman, and it's
Uh-huh.
Living When a Loved One Has Died. And it's a
Mm-hmm.
pocket-sized one too, and
Uh-huh.
it's a, you know, people go through all those stages of grief, but sometimes they're not knowing how to handle that cohesively. And he's a rabbi and a grief counselor. That's
Mm-hmm.
that's what he specialized in, and he wrote that book as a gentle guidance to get through those stages of shock and suffering and recovery, and how to
Right.
emphasize healing on that personal journey and in relationship with with the person who's passed even. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so there's so
Right.
many wonderful books, but I love that one
Or
that story you just told us. That really resonates. And
yeah,
it's
and
a good example.
the second half of his book talks about logotherapy, which is what he called the concepts that he had discovered,
Mhm.
and he puts it out so that you can use them.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And
So
what a
yeah,
resource. So like even though he had all this work burned in front of him,
yeah,
in this process, a whole nother uh, work was inspired.
exactly. Exactly. He could have taken it as, oh, I no longer exist. My identity has been negated. I'm in
Right.
this concentration camp. There's no hope. I'll be
Mhm.
lucky if I live another day. But instead, he started looking for patterns of human behavior. He started kind of like keeping a notebook in his head of
Yeah.
everything that he was observing. And then when he got out, he wrote it. And it's a classic now. To this day, you can get it at the library, library loan, any bookstore.
Mhm.
Yeah. Hmm.
What a great
So,
book.
yeah, it just shows that no matter what happens, because to me at least, that kind of existence, being in a concentration camp or one of the death camps, it's like it's hard to think of something worse than that.
Well, that's the
So,
thing. When people are going through things, sometimes it's easy to tell yourself, oh, this is the worst thing ever, or nobody
mhm,
else has been through anything worse. This is gut-wrenching, heart-wrenching, whatever for me. And then you're like, oh, wait a minute. There-
uh-huh,
like their whole all of this is gone, and they da 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 that somehow they were able triumphantly to move through that. But there's this other
mhm,
part of you, that little human part, I guess, that says, "Oh, I'm not like them. I'm not as courageous. I
mhm,
I'm missing out on these other important ingredients in the recipe." But I
mhm.
think the big message from you today is that we aren't missing out on those ingredients.
No, we're not.
We're
We're
not.
not.
We have all of the components necessary within ourselves to strive for, to thrive in strange conditions, and that we can honor that process of building toward the light and
Mhm.
rebuilding
You know,
ourselves necessary.
and we develop resilience by that. Just look at the people who lost their homes out west in the wildfires, and they lost everything, even the pictures of loved ones who had passed
Yeah.
and other highly sentimental things, because uh, ordinary physical things can be replaced, but photographs, things like that cannot be replaced, but you still have the memories. No
Hmm.
wildfire can take away your memories.
That's right.
And that reminds me too of the phrase that they will say when someone is passed, may so and so's memory be a blessing.
Oh, yes, that's
Yeah.
beautiful. Yes.
May it be a blessing. Yeah. And so, yeah, you can carry that memory with you wherever you go. It can inspire you. It can help you develop in all sorts of ways. Yeah.
I love that. I know our time is coming to an end soon. What are some other thoughts you could share with us about grief and resilience?
Hmm. Okay. Uh, Competitive suffering.
Ooh,
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
Um, and I've seen people fall into this trap time and time again over the years. People will say, "Oh, I shouldn't be feeling so bad. So and so has it much more worse than I do." So they'll do that to push grief away. Okay. Or
But if
like
they,
you say,
in turn, they can use that as something to get them out of grief too, right?
mm-hmm,
And the
yeah,
flip side.
uh-huh.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's like, okay, bad things happen to people, to good people. And I work on the things that happen to me, and I try to be a helping resource to other people who have things to work through also. I ask them what they're needing. Okay, that's what we can do. Okay. And then those people have their things that they work on. You don't want to compare yours to someone else's. It's
Mm.
always good to look at what the hard times other people have had to learn how they got through it, like with Man's Search for Meaning. So you can learn and develop and become more resilient. But you don't want to compare to judge and say, well, this one is worse than that one, or um, or woe is me, I have the worst situation in the whole world. In fact, that reminds me of the saying, I cried because I had no shoes till I met a man who had no feet.
Oh.
Hmm.
Mhm.
So yeah, we have to get with with grief, we have to get rid of the judgment, all different kinds of judgment, because that doesn't help us move through the grief. It doesn't help us resolve it. It doesn't help us grow and develop that resilience that it's offering us. Resilience is kind of the flip side of grief. If we visualize a coin and grief is on one side, resilience is on the other, two sides of the same coin. So, yeah, I just wanted to mention competitive suffering because I see
Yes.
a lot of people fall into that trap.
It's easy enough to do. It's easy enough
Hmm.
to do.
It
And
sure
and
is.
sometimes we'll say, well, I'm grieving more than so and so. They're hardly affected. Well, you don't necessarily know that.
That's right. You don't know what's going on with someone else.
Mhm.
Just like when we're driving on the road, and I've seen this happen with people driving down the road and somebody cuts you off. And it's like the driver who's been cut off says, "Oh, that blankety blankety blank blank, he doesn't care about anybody except himself," and starts nurturing that anger. And it's probably displaced anger. Okay.
Right, right.
And they don't know. The driver doesn't know that the person who cut him off may have just found out that his whole family died in a house fire. And he's just trying to get to where he needs to go to take care of things and misjudge the distance, which is natural to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, yeah, we never know what's going on with someone else
And what they're juggling in life. Yeah.
and what they're juggling. And so that calls on us to have compassion and empathy for everybody. Okay, because we don't know what's going on inside them. And that in turn helps us to develop even more resilience.
Yeah, I think that compassion is a very necessary component for ourselves and others in building that resilience and building those muscles
Right.
to deal with the vagaries of life, and so that
Mm-hmm.
we can decide how we're going to proceed positively as we go forward. And just a quick note, sometimes people, they may be missing a person, but they also may be missing the habit of them. If they
Mm-hmm.
were used to sharing their life with them or always talking on the phone with them every day, or, this is the holiday that, always made sure we were together, or all of the different things that are the habits that we have based
Mm-hmm.
with a person. In terms of building resilience through those things, it's taking a moment to honor them, but knowing that they want us to remember the beautiful parts, not in I want to cry every little time I think about it, but in a way of, I'm so grateful I had that time with them, that we did
Right.
build these memories. And I know that my loved one would not want me to be in a state of mired down grief. They want me to be experiencing joy because that's the vibrational frequency that they always
Mm-hmm.
tried to bring forward. So I think there's in building resilience, it's the remembering the good of the relationship and who you were and vibrating at that again.
Right, right. Kind of like being thankful for having had that person in your life,
The
or
gratitude,
that job, or that house, or
right?
that pet. Okay. Because while we're talking about grief from someone passing, it also applies to all these other life situations
True.
too. Yeah, just, acknowledging the good that we got from that, how we learned from that, how we developed, and feeling the feelings, and then moving on and developing resilience from that. It
There's
goes
a really cool Helen Keller quote that I'll share with people right now. And the quote is, "What we have once enjoyed deeply, we can never lose. All that we love deeply becomes a part of us."
Mhm. Wonderful. So well put.
Yeah. So
So
we can
well put.
access that again. Sometimes it's about reaccessing those places, even though they're maybe so tied to a certain individual. But once those have been tapped into, we can tap into those again with others if we so wish, and with ourselves and with the divine, and that we have many
Mhm.
more options and the amazing potential that is before us if we but let that loose and let that light out and in.
Mhm. Yeah. Wonderful. Beautifully put.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any last things? I know we should close for our episode, but this has been wonderful, Brenda.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, that's can't think of anything
Yeah, it
else.
feels really complete, and I feel like you gave us so many things, words of wisdom relating to grief and resilience. So I'm so appreciative of you coming on the show again and sharing with folks. And just to remind everyone, Brenda is a retired psychologist, so she's not available for that kind of counseling, and she's a registered medium who's on sabbatical. So although she's not available for private readings, this summer. You may see her out and about. And of course, we'll have her back on the show whenever we can. And look back at the past episodes that I've had with Dr. Brenda Hawkins. Some of you may need to view that past episode of mediumship and the stages of grief, managing emotional overwhelm. We also did one on grief and hoarding and spiritual emergence. And I'm so grateful that she comes in with the real emotional and mental grounding for everyone. And I really hope people enjoy. Please let us know that you enjoyed this episode and that you're so thankful for Dr. Brenda Hawkins for being here today. And we'll look forward to another great show next week, same time, same place, on Wednesdays with Willa here on Willa White Medium and also my YouTube channel, Willa White. All right.
And
Thank you,
thanks for
Brenda.
having me. Bye.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Bye, everyone.